The station hung in the darkness of space like a massive crystal. Threshold Prime was the most neutral place in the known galaxy. No species owned it. No military forces protected it. It simply existed as a meeting point where civilizations could talk without fear. Today, 17 different species had gathered inside the main chamber. The room was enormous, with walls that seemed to stretch into infinity. Holographic displays floated everywhere, translating languages and showing data streams. The air processors worked overtime to maintain 17 different atmospheric preferences in separate zones. Lieutenant Hyunwoo Park stood near the back of the human delegation area. He wore a simple gray uniform with minimal decorations. His job was to take notes and carry documents. Nothing more. Ambassador Lee stood at the front, representing Earth and all of humanity. This was their formal evaluation day. Hyunwoo watched the other species with quiet curiosity. The Manthrex looked like giant insects made of bronze metal. The Yulreen floated in globes of purple liquid. The Drethics sat in powered armor that hissed and clicked with each movement. Every species was so different, yet they all managed to work together in this council. At the center of the chamber, the Calthine waited. They were crystalline beings that reflected light in strange patterns. Their bodies looked like living glass sculptures. The Calthine were famous across the galaxy. They were the master logicians, the keepers of wisdom, the species that understood patterns better than anyone else. High Logician Velmakra stepped forward. The crystal being's voice came through the translation system as a series of clear tones. Every species heard it in their own language simultaneously. We welcome humanity to this evaluation. You have traveled far in a short time. Your species has shown courage and adaptability, but the galaxy requires more than courage. It requires wisdom. It requires the ability to think beyond simple solutions. Hyunwoo listened carefully. He had studied the Calthine for months before this meeting. They valued logic above all else. Their entire civilization was built on mathematical principles and rational thought. Velmakra raised one crystalline limb. The space above the chamber floor shimmered. A massive holographic construct appeared. It looked like a three-dimensional maze made of light with thousands of interconnected nodes. Lines of energy flowed between the nodes in complex patterns. Some nodes pulsed with different colors. Others seemed to exist in multiple places at once. This is the eternal paradox, Velmakra announced. For 10,000 years, every species that joins the Galactic Council must face this challenge. It is a logic puzzle that has no easy answer. Some species take decades to solve it. Some take centuries. The Manthrex required 52 years. The Drethic needed 87 years. The Yulreen are still working on it after 140 years. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Yulreen delegation shifted in their liquid globes, clearly embarrassed by the reminder. Velmakra continued. This puzzle tests your ability to think in multiple dimensions. It requires understanding quantum states, temporal loops, and nonlinear causality. It requires patience and dedication. We do not expect humanity to solve it quickly. Take your time, study it. Bring your best minds together. We will wait. Ambassador Lee stepped forward. She was an older woman with gray hair and a calm demeanor. We appreciate the honor of facing this challenge. Humanity accepts. We request time to study the puzzle and assemble our finest thinkers. She was about to say more when Hyunwoo raised his hand. Ambassador Lee paused. She turned to look at her aide. Several other humans in the delegation looked surprised. Raising your hand during formal proceedings was unusual. Yes, Lieutenant Park? Ambassador Lee asked. Hyunwoo stepped forward. His heart was beating fast, but his voice was steady. May I ask a question about the puzzle? Velmakra's crystalline form turned toward him. You may ask. Hyunwoo looked up at the massive holographic construct. He had been analyzing it while Velmakra spoke. His mind had been breaking down the patterns, looking at the connections, studying the flow of energy. Do you want the simple solution first, or should I explain the elegant one? The chamber fell completely silent. Every species stopped moving. The translation system seemed to pause. Even the air processors went quiet. Velmakra's crystalline body flickered. The pattern of light inside them changed rapidly. What did you say? Hyunwoo kept his voice calm and respectful. I asked if you wanted the simple solution first. There's also a more elegant solution, but it takes longer to explain. I wasn't sure which you would prefer. The Drethic delegation leader stood up suddenly. Their powered armor made loud mechanical sounds. This is an insult. The human mocks the eternal paradox. Other species began talking among themselves. Some sounded angry, others sounded confused. The Manthrex delegation leader clicked their mandibles together in what might have been laughter. Ambassador Li looked at Yunwu with wide eyes. She knew him well enough to know he wouldn't joke about something like this. Lieutenant Park, are you saying you can solve this puzzle right now? Yes, Ambassador. I've been looking at it while the High Logician was explaining. It's actually not as complicated as it appears. Velmakra moved closer. Their crystalline form cast strange shadows across the floor. No species has ever claimed to solve the eternal paradox immediately. You have been looking at it for less than 5 minutes. That's true, Hyunwoo admitted. But I've been solving puzzles like this since I was a child. Humanity has a long tradition of logic games and brain teasers. We do them for fun. The Yulreen delegate spoke up, their voice bubbling through their liquid sphere. Impossible. This puzzle has quantum elements that require years of study. Hyunwoo nodded politely. It does have quantum elements. But those elements are actually just window dressing. They make the puzzle look more complex than it actually is. Velmakra's entire body began to pulse with light. Hyunwoo couldn't tell if this was anger or excitement. Explain yourself, human. Ambassador Li made a decision. She had hired Hyunwoo specifically because he was brilliant. She had to trust that brilliance now. You have my permission to proceed, Lieutenant. Hyunwoo walked toward the holographic display. He reached out and touched one of the nodes. The hologram responded to his touch, allowing him to manipulate it. May I? He asked Velmakra. The Kalthine logician stepped back. Show us. Hyunwoo took a deep breath. He was about to change everything. He just didn't know it yet. The first thing you need to understand, he began, is that humans have a saying. If you can't solve a problem, you're probably asking the wrong question. He began to work. Hyunwoo stood before the massive holographic puzzle. Every species in the chamber watched him. He could feel their eyes on his back. Some expected him to fail. Others hoped he would succeed. A few just wanted to see what would happen next. He began by rotating the entire construct. The hologram spun slowly, revealing different angles. Thousands of nodes connected by energy lines filled his vision. To most observers, it looked like pure chaos. But Hyunwoo saw something else. The puzzle is built on 17 foundational axioms, he said. His voice was clear and steady. These axioms define how information flows through the system. They establish rules about causality, time, and quantum states. Velmakra's crystalline form pulsed. Correct. These axioms are universal laws of logic. That's where the problem starts, Hyunwoo replied. He touched several nodes, highlighting them in red. 3 of these axioms aren't universal laws at all. They're cultural constructs specific to Kalthine thinking. Gasps echoed through the chamber. A Kalthine junior logician spoke up, their voice sharp. That is impossible. Our axioms have been tested for thousands of years. Hyunwoo nodded respectfully. They work perfectly within your logical framework. But they're not required by the universe itself. Let me show you. He isolated one section of the puzzle. This axiom states that information cannot flow backward through a causal chain without creating a paradox. That's true in classical logic, but it assumes that time flows in only one direction for all observers. He manipulated the hologram, showing different configurations. In human quantum mechanics, we learned that information doesn't actually flow backward. Instead, entangled particles share states across time. There's no paradox because there's no actual backward flow. It just looks that way from certain reference frames. The Manthrex delegate leaned forward with interest. Their bronze mandibles clicked together. Fascinating. Continue. Hyunwoo highlighted another section. The second problematic axiom assumes that all logical statements must be either true or false. Binary thinking. But humans discovered thousands of years ago that some statements can be both, neither or somewhere in between. We call it fuzzy logic. Velmakra's light patterns became more agitated. That would introduce chaos into the system. It would introduce flexibility, Hyunwoo corrected gently. Which is different from chaos. Watch what happens when I remove these 3 axioms. He began removing connections from the hologram. Each time he removed one, the puzzle simplified. Entire sections collapsed into simpler forms. The quantum loops resolved themselves. The temporal paradoxes disappeared. Within 2 minutes, the massive construct had reduced to something much smaller. It now showed only 3 primary variables connected by basic logical relationships. This is the core puzzle, Hyunwoo explained. Everything else was complexity added by assumptions that weren't necessary. Now solving it is straightforward. He worked through the solution quickly. Variable A affected variable B in this way. Variable B influenced variable C like this. Variable C looped back to A with this relationship. The solution became obvious once the unnecessary layers were stripped away. The chamber was completely silent. Yunwu turned to face Velmakra. That's the simple solution. It takes about 4 minutes to solve once you remove the cultural assumptions. But I understand this might feel unsatisfying. You've spent thousands of years with this puzzle. Having it collapse so quickly probably feels wrong. The Drethic delegation leader stood up again. Their armor hissed with hydraulic pressure. This proves nothing. He simply broke the puzzle instead of solving it. But Hyunwoo held up his hand. I anticipated that concern. That's why I mentioned there's also an elegant solution, one that works even with all 17 axioms intact. Velmakra moved closer. Their crystalline body was now pulsing rapidly with different colors. Explain. Hyunwoo restored the hologram to its original state. The elegant solution doesn't remove any axioms. Instead, it approaches the puzzle from a completely different angle. He began highlighting patterns that others hadn't noticed. Humans developed something called game theory. It studies strategic decision-making. One key insight is that some games can't be won by playing within the established rules. You have to change your objective. He manipulated the hologram, showing how different nodes could be grouped together. The eternal paradox asks you to find a stable state where all variables resolve without contradiction. That's the explicit goal. But what if the goal itself is the trap? The Yulreen delegate bubbled in confusion. What other goal could there be? Don't seek stability, Hyunwoo said. Seek harmony. He showed them a new configuration. Instead of trying to make all the nodes reach a fixed state, he demonstrated how they could flow in a continuous cycle. The energy moved through the system in waves. Each wave was slightly different, but they all followed the same underlying pattern. This is a stable oscillation, he explained. Nothing is static, but nothing is chaotic either. It's like music. Individual notes change constantly, but the melody remains consistent. Velmakra stared at the hologram. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then the High Logician began to vibrate. Sound came from their crystalline body. It was laughter. Pure, genuine laughter. Remarkable, Velmakra said. We have been staring at this puzzle for 10,000 years. We always assumed the goal was to stop the movement. You simply let it flow. The Manthrex delegate clicked their mandibles in approval. The human has done well, but the Drethic were not convinced. Their delegation leader's armor clanked as they moved forward. We demand verification. These solutions must be checked by our own logicians. The human could be wrong. Ambassador Lee stepped forward. We welcome verification. Lieutenant Park's work should be examined thoroughly. Velmakra agreed. Yes, we will assemble teams from every species. They will study both solutions. This will take time. The session was adjourned. Species began filing out of the chamber, talking animatedly in their various languages. Some were excited. Others were skeptical. A few looked worried. Hyunwoo stood alone near the hologram, suddenly feeling very tired. He had just done something big. He wasn't sure if it was good or bad yet. Ambassador Lee approached him. That was either brilliant or career-ending. Possibly both. I'm sorry if I overstepped, Hyunwoo said. She shook her head. No, you did what you thought was right. Now we wait to see what happens. What happened over the next 3 days would change everything. Teams of alien logicians worked around the clock. They checked every calculation. They tested every assumption. They ran simulations and built models. The Kulthine brought their finest minds. The Drethic deployed their military mathematicians. Even the Yulreen, still embarrassed about their own century-long struggle with the puzzle, contributed their expertise. On the morning of the 4th day, Velmakra called everyone back to the chamber. The High Logician's crystalline form was dim. They looked tired, if that was possible for a being made of living crystal. We have completed our verification, Velmakra announced. Both solutions are valid. The simple solution works. The elegant solution works. The human was correct. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others shouted in disbelief. The Drethic delegation sat in stony silence. Hyunwoo felt relief wash over him. He hadn't been wrong, but then he noticed something. Velmakra looked sad. The other Kulthine logicians had dimmed their lights as well. He realized what he had done. He had taken away something precious from them. The eternal paradox had defined their civilization for thousands of years. Now it was solved. Finished. Before he could say anything, an alarm sounded throughout the station. The alarm was not a physical threat. No ships were attacking. No systems were failing. This was a political alarm. The Drethic Concordat had called for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. Hyunwoo sat in the human delegation area, watching as species filed back into the chamber. The mood had changed. 3 days ago, there had been curiosity and wonder. Now there was tension. The Drethic delegation leader stood at the center of the floor. Their powered armor gleamed under the station lights. Through the translation system, their voice came across as harsh and direct. "We must discuss the human problem," they announced. "What happened here is not a triumph. It is a warning." Ambassador Lee stood up. "A warning about what?" The Drethic leader turned to face her. "A warning about a species that thinks rules do not apply to them. The eternal paradox has stood for 10,000 years. It is a tradition. It is a shared experience that binds this council together. Every species has struggled with it. Every species has learned patience and humility from it." They gestured toward Hyunwoo. "Then this human arrives and tears it apart in minutes. He does not respect our traditions. He does not understand the value of shared struggle. He simply wants to show how clever he is." Murmurs of agreement came from some delegations. Not everyone, but enough to matter. Hyunwoo felt his stomach tighten. This was getting bad fast. The Yulreen delegate spoke up from their liquid sphere. The Drethic raised a valid concern. "Humanity is very young, only 200 years in space. Perhaps they are not ready for full council membership." A Sivreen delegate, a floating energy being, added their voice. "They solve our ancient puzzle in minutes, then act as if it was simple. This shows arrogance." Ambassador Lee tried to defend them. Lieutenant Park meant no disrespect. He was asked to solve the puzzle. He solved it. That was the challenge. But the Drethic leader cut her off. The challenge was meant to teach patience, to show that some things cannot be rushed. "Your species missed the entire point." Velmakra had been silent through all of this. The High Logician stood at the edge of the chamber, their crystalline form dim and still. Finally they spoke. "The Drethic are not entirely wrong," Velmakra said quietly, "but neither are they entirely right." Everyone turned to look at the Kalthine leader. "The human did solve our puzzle," Velmakra continued. "Both solutions are mathematically valid. We verified this ourselves." But the Drethic asked an important question. "What does this mean for our civilization? If humans can casually dismantle what we considered sacred, what else will they change?" The session ended without resolution. The council would debate this for days, maybe weeks. Humanity's membership was now in question. Back in the human quarters, Hyunwoo sat alone. He felt terrible. He had been trying to help, and instead he had created a diplomatic crisis. Ambassador Lee came in. She sat down beside him. "It's not your fault." "It feels like my fault," Hyunwoo replied. "I should have been more careful. I should have understood what the puzzle meant to them. You solved an impossible problem. You did exactly what they asked. I broke something they valued. That's worse than failing." Before Ambassador Lee could respond, there was a knock at the door. A young woman entered. She wore the uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps and carried several data tablets. "Lieutenant Park, I'm Ji-Won. I've been sent from Earth to help manage this situation." Hyunwoo looked up. "What situation?" Ji-Won smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "The situation where you became the most famous human in the galaxy overnight." She activated one of her tablets. Holographic news feeds appeared, showing stories from dozens of worlds. Every major galactic news network was covering the story. Some headlines were positive, most were not. "Human disrupts ancient tradition. New species shows dangerous arrogance. Kalthine wisdom challenged by upstart civilization. Is humanity too smart for the galaxy?" G1 scrolled through more feeds. "You've got fan clubs on some worlds. The younger generation of several species thinks you're amazing. They're calling you a genius who freed them from outdated thinking." "And the older generation?" Hyunwoo asked. "They think you're dangerous. There are protests on 3 different worlds demanding that humanity be rejected from the council. The Drethic are leading the opposition, but they're not alone." Ambassador Lee frowned. "Why are the Drethic so opposed to us?" G1 pulled up more data. "The Drethic Concordat has held significant power in the council for over 2,000 years. They're known as master strategists and intellectuals. Their entire social structure is based on intellectual achievement. If humans can solve in minutes what takes them decades, it undermines their position. So this is about politics, Hyunwoo said. Everything is about politics, Ji-won replied. But that doesn't make it less real. The Drethik are genuinely worried. If humanity joins the council with this kind of problem-solving ability, we could shift power balances that have been stable for millennia. Hyunwoo stood up and walked to the window. Outside, stars filled the darkness. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were talking about him. He had never wanted this kind of attention. What can I do? He asked. For now, nothing, Ji-won said. The council is debating. We wait. But waiting was not something Hyunwoo was good at. His mind kept working, kept analyzing the problem. There had to be a solution. Everything had a solution if you looked at it the right way. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. Velmakra requested a private meeting with Hyunwoo. Ambassador Lee was suspicious. It could be a trap, but Ji-won disagreed. The Kaltheen don't operate that way. If Velmakra wants to talk, it's genuine. So Hyunwoo went to meet the High Logician. They met in a small chamber with walls of crystal. It was beautiful and slightly intimidating. Velmakra stood in the center of the room, their body casting rainbow patterns across the walls. For a long moment, they said nothing. Then they spoke. I want to apologize. Hyunwoo was surprised. Apologize? For what? For what we did to you. To your species, Velmakra moved closer. The eternal paradox was never meant to be solved. We have known this for thousands of years. Hyunwoo felt confused. I don't understand. The puzzle was designed as a meditation device, a reminder of the limits of logic. We created it to teach ourselves humility, to show that not everything can be understood through pure reason. Velmakra's light patterns shifted, but over time we forgot that original purpose. It became a test for other species, a way to make them prove their worth. We turned a tool for teaching humility into a weapon of pride. Then why did you let me solve it? Hyunwoo asked. Because I wanted to see what would happen. When you said there was a simple solution, I was offended, angry, but also curious. What could you possibly see that we had missed? Velmakra's body pulsed with light. You showed me that we had trapped ourselves. We built a puzzle with our own assumptions, then forgot those assumptions were choices, not laws. You freed us from that trap. But now everyone is angry, Hyunwoo said. I broke something important. You broke something that needed breaking, Velmakra replied. The Drethik are angry because they fear change. They fear losing power. But change is coming whether they like it or not. The galaxy needs new thinking. Velmakra extended a crystalline limb toward Hyunwoo. I want to propose an alliance. The Kaltheen and humanity working together. Hyunwoo hesitated. An alliance against the Drethik? An alliance for the galaxy. But first we must survive the next challenge. Hyunwoo returned to the human quarters with his mind racing. An alliance with the Kaltheen was huge. They were one of the most respected species in the galaxy. But Velmakra had mentioned another challenge. What did that mean? Ji-won and Ambassador Lee were waiting for him. They had news. The Drethik have issued a formal challenge, Ambassador Lee said. Her face was serious. They're invoking Article 7 of the Council Charter. Hyunwoo sat down. What's Article 7? Ji-won pulled up the relevant documents on her tablet. It's an old rule, rarely used. When a species is being considered for council membership, any existing member can challenge their suitability. The challenging species gets to design a test. If the candidate species fails, they're rejected. What kind of test? Hyunwoo asked. That's the problem, Ji-won replied. The Drethik get to choose. It can be anything they want as long as it's deemed fair by a majority of the council. Ambassador Lee looked worried. The Drethik are master strategists. Whatever test they design, it will be nearly impossible for us to pass. A message came through on the communication system. The council was convening again. The Drethik were ready to present their challenge. In the main chamber, every species had gathered once more. The atmosphere was electric with tension. Hyunwoo could feel eyes on him from every direction. Some sympathetic, some hostile, most just curious. The Drethik delegation leader stood at the center of the floor. Their powered armor gleamed like polished obsidian. We have designed a test that will prove whether humanity is ready for council membership, they announced. This is not a puzzle. This is not a game. This is a real problem that affects billions of lives across the galaxy. Holographic displays activated throughout the chamber. They showed maps, trade routes, resource flows, and population centers. The data was overwhelming in its complexity. This is the threshold crisis, the Drethic leader explained. For 300 years, our galactic trade network has been collapsing. Resources are not reaching where they are needed. Some worlds have massive surpluses that rot unused. Other worlds suffer from terrible scarcity. Trillions of beings across the galaxy are affected. The displays showed the scale of the problem. Food shortages on agricultural worlds while industrial worlds had excess. Medical supplies stacked in warehouses while plague spread on distant colonies. Energy resources wasted while entire stations ran on minimum power. Every species in this council has tried to fix this problem, the Drethic continued. We have created committees, task forces, and working groups. We have built new computational models. We have negotiated thousands of trade agreements. Nothing has worked. The problem is too complex. They turned to face the human delegation. If humanity is as clever as they claim, let them solve this. Not a theoretical puzzle, but a real crisis. You have 30 days. If you fail, you will be rejected from council consideration for 100 years. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species thought the challenge was fair. Others thought it was impossible and therefore unfair. Hyunwoo stood up. May I speak? The room fell quiet. Before I accept or reject this challenge, I have questions. First, can we access all relevant data about the trade network? The Drethic leader nodded. Full access will be provided. Second, can we work with representatives from other species? Or must humanity solve this alone? The Drethic leader smiled. It was not a kind smile. You may work with anyone willing to help you, but you will quickly discover that every species has already tried their best. There is no solution. Hyunwoo looked at Ambassador Lee. She gave him a small nod. The decision was his. We accept the challenge, Hyunwoo said. Back in the human quarters, Jiwon paced back and forth. This is impossible. Absolutely impossible. 300 years and the galaxy's best minds haven't solved this. What makes you think we can do it in 30 days? Hyunwoo was already studying the data they had been given. Screens floated around him showing trade routes, economic systems, resource distributions, and cultural factors. There was so much information it made his head hurt. I don't know if we can solve it, he admitted, but I know we have to try. Ambassador Lee sat down beside him. What's your approach? The same as with the eternal paradox. First, I need to understand what assumptions people are making. Why has this problem been unsolvable? He spent the next 2 days doing nothing but reading reports. Reports from the Drethic Military Logistics Division. Reports from Colthian economic modeling teams. Reports from Manthrex biological systems analysts. Reports from dozens of other species, each approaching the problem from their own perspective. On the third day, Jiwon found him still reading. He had barely slept. Hyunwoo, you can't do this alone. You'll burn out. He looked up at her. His eyes were tired but excited. I'm not trying to do it alone. That's the whole point. Look at these reports. He pulled up several documents side by side. Every species has been trying to solve this independently. The Drethic created a master logistics algorithm. The Colthian built an economic prediction model. The Manthrex designed a biological efficiency system. Everyone worked separately, so? Jiwon asked. So that's the problem. They're all trying to create one perfect solution. But this isn't one problem. It's thousands of smaller problems all connected together. You can't solve it with a single approach. He stood up and began pacing. Here's what I think. The threshold crisis isn't actually a resource problem. It's a communication problem. Jiwon frowned. I don't follow. Look at this example. He pulled up data about a medical shortage. 3 agricultural worlds are suffering from a plague. They need specific medicine. That medicine is being manufactured on an industrial world, but it's sitting in warehouses because they can't find buyers. The agricultural worlds don't know it's available. The industrial world doesn't know it's needed. Both sides suffer because they're not talking to each other. But there are communication systems, Jiwon pointed out. The whole galaxy is connected. Connected, but not communicating, Hyunwoo said. Each species uses different systems, different languages, different protocols. Information gets lost in translation. By the time a need is identified and communicated and verified and processed, the situation has changed. He felt excitement building. We need to bring everyone together. Not to create one solution, but to create a framework where thousands of solutions can emerge naturally. How? Jiwon asked. I need to talk to Velmakra and the Manthrex. And representatives from every council species, including the Drethic. Jiwan looked skeptical. The Drethic won't help us. They designed this challenge to make us fail. Maybe. But they also included data from their own logistics systems, which means they've been working on this problem too. They want it solved just as much as anyone else. Over the next week, Hyunwoo assembled a team. Felmakra provided Kalthine computational experts. The Manthrek sent their systems analysts. The Yulreen contributed their fluid dynamics specialists, which turned out to be useful for understanding resource flows. Even the Drethic sent someone, a logistics officer named Tarek. They came reluctantly, clearly under orders to observe rather than help. Hyunwoo held the first meeting in a large conference room. Representatives from 12 species gathered around a holographic table. "Thank you all for coming," Hyunwoo began. "I want to start by saying that I can't solve this problem. None of us can solve it alone. But together we might find something better than a solution." One of the Kalthine logicians spoke up. "What is better than a solution?" "A system," Hyunwoo replied. "Not one answer, but a framework that adapts and evolves." He activated the holographic display. "I've been studying all of your reports. Every species has made progress on different aspects of this crisis. The Drethic have amazing logistics algorithms. The Kalthine have predictive models that can forecast needs months in advance. The Manthreks understand biological systems and can identify health crises before they become critical." He looked around the table. "But none of you have been sharing this work with each other. Why?" There was an uncomfortable silence. Finally, Tarek the Drethic spoke. "We submitted our findings to the Council Working Group 3 years ago." A Manthrex analyst clicked their mandibles. "We submitted ours 5 years ago." Velmakra's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "We have submitted 17 different reports over the past century." Hyunwoo nodded. "Exactly. You've all been sending reports to committees, papers to archives, data to databases, but you haven't been talking to each other directly. You haven't been building on each other's work." He pulled up a new display. "Here's what I propose. We stop trying to fix the entire trade network. Instead, we create a new system that sits alongside it. A real-time coordination network where every world, every station, every ship can communicate needs and resources directly." The Yulreen representative bubbled skeptically. "That would require a universal translation protocol. 17 different species with 47 different economic systems would never agree." "You're right," Hyunwoo said. "They wouldn't agree to one system. So we don't make them. We make the system flexible enough to work with all of them." The work began in earnest. Hyunwoo's team divided into smaller groups, each focusing on different aspects of the coordination network. The Kalthine worked on the computational backbone. The Manthreks designed the biological monitoring systems. The Drethic, despite their initial reluctance, contributed their logistics expertise. Hyunwoo moved between groups, asking questions, making connections, and helping different species understand each other's work. He discovered that his real talent was not solving problems himself, but helping others solve problems together. On the 10th day, something remarkable happened. Tarek the Drethic approached Hyunwoo with an idea. "The human coordination concept has merit," Tarek said, their armor hissing quietly. "But it needs a security layer. Pirates and raiders could exploit a system that shares resource location data too openly." Hyunwoo smiled. "You're absolutely right. Do you have suggestions?" Tarek paused. They had expected resistance, not agreement. "Our military uses encrypted verification protocols. They could be adapted for civilian use. That's perfect. Can you work with the Kalthine computational team to integrate those protocols?" For the first time, Tarek seemed genuinely interested rather than obligated. "Yes, I will begin immediately." Jiwan watched this interaction and pulled Hyunwoo aside later. "You're doing something clever." "What do you mean?" "You're making them feel ownership of the solution. Everyone who contributes becomes invested in seeing it succeed." Hyunwoo shrugged. "I'm just using their expertise. They know far more than I do about their own systems." "Exactly," Jiwan said, "and that's why this might actually work." On the 15th day, they encountered their first major obstacle. The economic models from 3 different species were incompatible. The Kalthine used value calculations based on computational efficiency. The Drethic measured worth and strategic advantage. The Sivreen, being energy beings, had an entirely different concept of resources. The team argued for hours. Each species insisted their model was the correct one. The meeting was about to break down when Hyunwoo spoke up. "Stop. Everyone stop." He stood at the center of the room. "You're all right. And you're all wrong." They stared at him. "Each of your economic models works perfectly within your own culture. But that's the point. They're cultural constructs, not universal laws, just like the axioms in the eternal paradox." He pulled up a new display. "We don't need one economic model. We need the system to translate between models. When a Colthene world offers resources, the system calculates its value in Colthene terms. When a Drethic colony needs those resources, the system translates that value into Drethic terms." Velmakra's crystalline form pulsed with sudden understanding. "A universal translator, but for economic value instead of language." "Exactly," Hyunwoo said. The solution unlocked a cascade of progress. Over the next week, the framework began to take shape. It was not elegant like a mathematical proof. It was messy and complex, with dozens of different subsystems all working together. But that was the point. The galaxy was messy and complex. The solution had to match that reality. On the 25th day, they ran their first simulation. They modeled a small sector with 3 different species and a known resource distribution problem that had existed for years. The simulation ran for several hours. Everyone watched the holographic displays anxiously. When it finished, the results were promising but not perfect. The coordination network had successfully matched 70% of needs with available resources. 30% remained unresolved due to factors the system had not accounted for. Some team members were disappointed. 70% was not good enough. But Hyunwoo was excited. "Don't you see? This is better than we hoped." "How is 70% better?" asked one of the Manthrex analysts. "Because it's 70% more than we had before. And more importantly, the system identified the 30% it couldn't solve. It showed us exactly where the remaining problems are." He pulled up detailed reports the simulation had generated. "Look, this planet needs medical supplies but has no cargo capacity. This station has excess energy, but its transmission infrastructure is damaged. These are specific, solvable problems. We just need to add more subsystems to handle these cases." Velmakra approached the display. "The human is correct. A perfect solution does not exist for this problem. But an evolving solution is possible." They spent the final 5 days refining the framework. They added new subsystems. They created protocols for handling edge cases. They built in feedback mechanisms so the system could learn and adapt over time. On the 30th day, they presented their work to the full Galactic Council. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to see if humanity would fail or succeed. The Drethic delegation leader sat with obvious anticipation, clearly expecting failure. Hyunwoo stood at the center of the floor with his team behind him. Representatives from 12 different species stood together, ready to explain what they had built. "We were asked to solve the threshold crisis," Hyunwoo began. "We cannot do that. No one can solve it completely, because it's not one problem. It's thousands of problems that change every day." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Was he admitting defeat? "But we have created something that might be better than a solution. We call it the living network." The holographic displays activated. They showed the framework in all its complex glory. Subsystems connecting to subsystems, protocols interfacing with different technologies, real-time monitoring systems feeding into predictive models. This is not one solution created by one species. This is a collaborative framework built by 12 species working together. Each species contributed their expertise. The Drethic provided security protocols. The Colthene built the computational architecture. The Manthrex designed the monitoring systems. Tarek the Drethic stood up. "I can verify this. The security layers use our military-grade encryption, adapted for civilian coordination. They will protect against exploitation, while allowing legitimate resource sharing." Other team members stood and explained their contributions. The Manthrex analyst described the biological monitoring systems. A Colthene logician explained the predictive algorithms. A Yulreen specialist demonstrated the fluid resource distribution models. Hyunwoo continued. "The living network is not perfect. Our simulations show it can resolve about 70% of resource distribution problems immediately. But that 70% represents millions of lives improved, billions of resources no longer wasted." He pulled up projections. "And because the system is designed to learn and adapt, that percentage will improve over time." As more worlds connect to the network, as more data flows through it, it will become more efficient. The Drethic delegation leader stood up. 70% is not sufficient. You were asked to solve the crisis, not partially address it. But Velmakra interrupted. The Drethic are mistaken. The challenge was to demonstrate that humanity could function within galactic society. Lieutenant Park has done more than that. He has shown how galactic society can function better by working together. Other species began to speak up. The Manthrek supported the framework. The Yulreen, who had been skeptical, admitted the system showed promise. Even some of the Sivreen delegates expressed interest. A vote was called. Should humanity's solution be accepted? Should the living network be implemented? The vote was close, but it passed. The framework would be deployed in a test sector first. If it worked, it would expand across the galaxy. Then came the final vote. Should humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council? This vote was not close. 14 species voted in favor. Only the Drethic and 2 of their allies voted against. Humanity was in. Ambassador Lee looked stunned. G1 was crying quietly with relief. Hyunwoo felt exhausted and overwhelmed and grateful all at once. But the Drethic delegation leader approached him after the vote. Hyunwoo tensed, expecting anger. Instead, Tarek removed their helmet. It was the first time Hyunwoo had seen a Drethic's actual face. They looked tired, but their eyes showed respect. You fought well, Tarek said. I opposed your membership because I feared humanity would disrupt the balance of power. I was correct. You will disrupt it. But perhaps that disruption is needed. Tarek extended their hand in a human gesture they must have learned recently. The Drethic Concordat accepts humanity's membership. We may not always agree, but we acknowledge your worth. Hyunwoo shook their hand. Thank you. 3 months later, the living network had expanded to 12 sectors. Resource distribution efficiency had improved by 43% in those areas. Food reached hungry worlds faster. Medical supplies arrived before plagues could spread. Energy flowed to where it was needed most. The system was not perfect. There were still problems. But those problems were being solved every day by teams of different species working together. Hyunwoo received commendations from multiple governments. He was offered positions at prestigious research institutes. Universities across the galaxy wanted him to teach. He declined everything and requested reassignment to a quiet teaching post on Earth. He wanted to go home. On his last day at Threshold Prime, Velmakra came to say goodbye. You changed the galaxy, the High Logician said. Do you understand that? Hyunwoo smiled. I just asked some questions and helped people talk to each other. That is what changing the galaxy looks like.